What is up, geeks and geekettes? It's a very special edition of the Countdown to the Geek Cast. My name is Ted, aka Steady. Joining me is the one and only Retro Ray, and our special guest for today. He's basically responsible for a number, if not all, of our favorite animated movies, from some of our favorite comics and arcs that we've grown and loved. He is the producer, the director, the one and only Sam Lou. How are you doing, sir?
Very well. Wow, what an intro.
I was gonna list off all of my favorite projects of yours, and then I lost count because they're just
Yeah, dude, I was just gonna
all of
say.
them. So yeah, we're so glad you're here, man. It's we got a lot to talk about. We're gonna be talking about some of the projects you've worked on. We're gonna be talking about your most recent series that you worked on. Our background right here, Creature Commandos, the first project in the DCU under the DC Studios umbrella. So we'll get into that for sure. But I feel like we got to start off with this guy here and our passion and fandom for the San Antonio Spurs. If you don't already know, you can look it up on the internet. Anytime you see a picture of Sam, 9 times out of 10, he's sporting his San Antonio Spurs cap. So, Sam, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about this man right here because you've been a Spurs fan either all your life or for a very long time, and Coach Pop has been a major part of all of our lives, and he's brought so much joy to our city here in San Antonio. But specifically, is there anything that you'd like to say regarding Popovich, or something that you might have learned, or something that he said that's really stuck with you over the years? Anything at all?
Oof. Wow. I am not prepared. But it's weird because I mean, obviously I work in animation. Do you know what I mean? But there is there's a thing about like sports analogies. I feel like that
Mm.
a lot of us use, and I'm sure it's not just us, but like it's such a it's almost like a war type thing in a way, right? It's an objective, and it's sort of like an execution kind of thing,
Mm.
and sort of a system, right? Because again, there's a time limit, there's a goal that you're trying to achieve, and then there's a team element that's involved, right? And so I don't know, like there's so much about like I feel like what pop, and again, like I feel stupid for saying this because I'm what I mean, I work in animation or I'm this like nerdy guy that's like I work on stuff that
I got you. We
I'm
got
surprised
you.
people watch sometimes.
Yeah.
But again, like we do deal with like adversities, right? There's a
Right.
mental kind of element that kind of, especially like burnout. You know what I mean? Because again, a lot of times um, you have to adjust. It's not like you have all the time in the world to kind of do something, and you're trying to sort of efficiently execute kind of things, right? And so that's a lot of it is sort of like, again, like in our case, it's like story and things like that, right? It's like you have to break things down to its pieces. You know what
Mm.
I mean?
Wow.
You need to simplify kind of things, and you need to sort of cast in a way. And it's like again like the coaching element of it. Again, I feel like I every time I listen to an interview with Pop just about coaching or whatever, I feel like in a weird sort of tangential kind of way, it can apply to kind of like what I have to do, how you navigate people, how do you navigate like egos, personalities, um, you know, um, how do you sort of like put people in a situation to succeed, right? And so,
100%.
um, yeah, again, there's just so much about it, right? And again, there's so many things that you, as a humanitarian, and sort of a thing that's you could because again, you can get very tunnel vision in it, right? And you can get sort of stuck in it. But again, like just every time I read something about pop or what a lot of times actually it's what people write about pop, right? Because again, I don't feel like he breaks it down. He's not somebody that's sort of like, will kind of like dissect and like his process and all that kind of stuff. So a lot of times like I feel like it's other people that sort of like highlight it and sort of like give you a little bit of the behind the scenes kind of thing of actually what's kind of going on,
Right.
things that he doesn't promote, right? Um,
Yeah,
and some of them are just incredibly sort of like, I don't
they're
know,
profound.
profound, and just like it's you would think that, because again, like I feel like when you're in a position of power, right, or you're in an organization where, I mean, you're, especially when you're sort of higher up on it, right, like a lot of people can get lost in the power, right, and then their humanity
Yep.
starts to wane, right, because they start becoming, this starts going to a whole different kind of thing, right? But there's a basic personality in my mind of like what power people generally kind of do, and a lot of times it's toxic, right? Because they're entitled to do it, right? Because
Right,
they're allowed to do it, right?
Yeah.
But
right.
I don't know. Again, just there's just things about pop which is so contrary to that. And again, it's things that sometimes makes me just think about things of like, you got to keep your head on straight, and you got to like appreciate people. You know what I mean? You have to make time for things that are important in your life. And again, it's not about your work. You know.
Yeah.
I've been my YouTube sort of recommendations are just filled with videos about people bringing up their personal, stories, like you mentioned, them highlighting things that we didn't know, we weren't privy to, media doesn't know about. And so yeah, I'm just like, wow, how many lives
Yeah.
he's touched and
Somebody should make a
people
book
he's influenced.
and collect all those stories, because I'm, I've only heard like maybe 10 to 20 of them, and I'm sure
Yeah.
there's way more.
Oh yeah,
I love
millions.
them.
I'm learning new ones every single day just because
Yep.
now it's like everywhere. Now it's coming out, everybody's coming out of the woodwork now. They're like talking about what he meant to them and doing what we're doing here. And Ray and I were talking. I, you've never been to a Spurs game, I think. So is the 25-26 season the year that Sam attends his first San Antonio home game?
Yeah. That he has never that I know of. The last I talked to him, he said he had not come to San Antonio before. So he's never been to a San Antonio Spurs game.
I have not. The sad thing is, it just sort of in the back of my mind, right? I was like, I'm gonna go to a game. I mean, I've seen them play, right? Because in LA and things like
Over in
that.
LA, yeah. You got two teams over there.
Oof, especially during the Shaq Kobe era, or whatever, like that. Like my obviously, like everybody's a Laker fan in LA, right? So it's a scary, situation to sort of be in. Um,
God
but
bless you.
one of my like good friends is their hardcore Laker fans. So again, every time they were in town, we would get tickets. You know, we can do that, and we would watch. But I wanted to go to a Spurs game in San Antonio before Manu Ginobili retired, but he
Oh.
just suddenly just decided, and I was like, no,
Yeah.
give me some warning. So, anyways,
Those were that's the weird thing, and I promise for the fans who are watching, we're gonna get to Sam's projects pretty soon. That's the thing about
no, let's
this
just talk about
whole
Spurs' whole thing.
we totally could. I'd be okay with it. Part 2, we'll get to Sam's work and projects. The weird thing about our team here in San Antonio is, like, we haven't had closure with anybody. Duncan retired on, like, his last game was on somebody else's court.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Tony went to go play for somebody else before he retired. Ginobili we had more time with, but it was sort of, kind of gone in a flash. Kawhi up and left in a bad way, bad taste in our mouth. And now Pop, we didn't even get to finish the season with him. Like, we don't get sort of
The
a
farewell.
farewell tour with anybody.
yeah,
I envy LA, and you guys over in LA got to see Kobe for a whole season ahead of time, knowing he was gonna leave. You got to like appreciate that because you knew what was gonna happen. And it's weird. We never got anything like that. So
yeah,
it's been a really odd like 10 years of just ups and downs, mostly downs, but we're super hopeful with the team that we got
yeah,
if they're healthy and they're young and athletic, which we've not been for, 20 years it feels like. So,
yeah. It's super exciting,
oof, yeah.
it's still not done yet.
No,
So
Nope.
um,
wild.
I yeah, I mean, obviously this draft is potentially um, could be another nail biter leading up to it.
Tomorrow, right? We're
Happening
getting
tomorrow, right?
our
Yeah,
they're doing the numbers pick tomorrow, I think.
yeah, yeah,
It's gonna
And
be interesting.
I think Coach Mitch. They announced Coach Mitch is going to be present, and I'm like, wait a minute. Nothing against Mitch, but like we couldn't give Pop this. Like, you know what I
El
mean?
jefe.
El Jefe. Yeah.
Yeah.
So stay tuned. Tomorrow we'll do a recap with Sam.
Oh
Sam,
man.
get to SA when you can, and we promise you we'll make it worth it. Getting you to a game, and you'll have a great time. In home, in person, it's unlike anything. And they keep saying, we're the team keeps saying we're the best fans, yada yada yada, and I'm just like, I really feel that everybody's more excited now. For years, we weren't selling out. We weren't really enthusiastic. Now it feels like every game has that playoff sort of environment, even though we don't know what that feels like. We haven't been in a playoff series in 10 years, I guess, or less. But yeah, it's wild. It's something is brewing, and you can feel it, the energy and the electricity now in person. It's there. It's coming. Something's gonna happen very soon. I hope.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's I think I don't know. It's just like the potential. Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean? It's like watching Vic, watching Steph like develop, and even sort of the veteran young guys. Do you know what I mean? It's almost like the stakes are different now. Do you know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
It's in and we've seen some of their potential. You know what I mean? And we sort of seen kind of like where they were at, but now it's a little bit of a different game, and how are they going to respond to that, and how they're going to develop, and are they, or you know what I mean? Like that stuff's all as a fan. I'm sure for them it sucks and super super stressful, but it's exciting for us, right? Because again, it's like this
Super.
unknown of kind of like I don't know, like
Big
there's
time. I
there's
mean, like,
that.
and that's the thing with Sam, being a Spurs fan.
I'll always remember I was wearing I went to LA 10 years ago. Funny
Hmm.
enough, it was 10 years ago. And we oh gosh, oh maybe a little bit more than 10 years ago. 10 or 12 years ago went to LA and I got a haircut. I went to a barber shop. I was wearing my Spurs shirt not on purpose, but my barber said, "Oh, you a Spurs fan?" And I was ready for the next line. I was like, "Oh, I'm going to get it. I'm going to." And surprisingly enough, she goes, "You know what? We can't even hate you guys because you do it the right way." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, cool." There was always a mutual respect with LA fans. They know, we beat them, they beat us. It's not easy to do that. So we respect to all the LA fans out there. Um, the rivalry was great, well lasted, and we'll always have those times, man. It was fantastic those times. All right, let's get to some actual actual work stuff. Sam, you've been a part of the DC animated slate for years, over a decade now. You've been like hands on working on, produced, drawn, directed some of the absolute greatest of all time animated films, and I'll go down a few of my lists later on. But I want to start off with your first project. To my surprise, and I know you've done all these DC movies, you've worked on Marvel and all that, but I feel like your very first animated project was a show that is near and dear to my heart, Extreme Ghostbusters. Is that right? Your first actual like animated project was Extreme Ghostbusters?
That's the first one that I. It's odd, right? And it's the weird thing about like business, right? But it's the first show that I storyboarded on and became a director.
Wow.
Nice.
And so, yeah,
I love
Extreme
that.
Ghostbusters was a very formative show for me.
Now
Nice.
I know it was a while back, but I am proudly here to say that I'm part of the local San Antonio charity group here. We hold multiple charity events year round. We collect money for organizations in San Antonio that we are passionate about. We collect toys in the winter. We collect school supplies in the summer. It's a very active group. It's open to anybody. If you're interested, look up the SATX Ghostbusters. But for you, like, what do you remember about working on that series? Now, this was back in a time where like fandom wasn't really super passionate. There wasn't a lot of entitlement out there. The fans were less opinionated, but everybody agreed Extreme Ghostbusters was incredible, an incredible sort of addition to the lore of Ghostbusters. And at the time, we were ready to accept anything because Ghostbuster fans, we're one of those franchises where we got nothing for over 15 years, and so we were ready for anything. So do you remember anything about working on that project, or like what it was like to kind of add to the franchise of Ghostbusters in general?
It's funny because I wasn't a huge Ghostbuster fan. I mean, I liked the movies, you
Sure.
know, but um, I didn't watch as many of the cartoons, to be honest. And I feel like I was so stressed out at the time because I'm just trying to like learn my job, you know,
Wow.
and do my job right.
Yeah.
And there's I don't know, it's such a weird thing, right? Because I think like I don't know, I'm trying to sort of think like because I think like there's the thing that I think people think when you work on something of kind of what it is it's kind of like you're actually sort of like cruising down the freeway, enjoying the kind of thing or whatever like that, right? But
Yeah.
I think it's a lot of it is just kind of like you're just hoping that the car isn't going to be on fire and the wheels are staying on. You know what I mean? And
I
you don't
gotcha. I
even like
gotcha.
realize like what does your car look like, or
Mm,
what does the scenery around it kind of look like? Because you're just trying to like get to a destination sometimes, right? And
sure.
so, um, I mean, I think I was more focused on just kind of like what the story was about. Do you know what I mean? Like who are these characters, kind of a thing, right? And sort of what are my shots going to be, and sort of, I mean, I remember more of just I was very happy that I had an episode which was about sort of like Asian characters, right? Um,
Mm,
and like James Hong was, you know what I mean, doing a voice on it. I was super excited about that. And
wow.
uh,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, again, it's a weird kind of thing, and I'll say that just even about because I get asked the question too, just kind of like oh, what's it like, sort of like doing an animated thing of these sort of like iconic sort of graphic novels, right?
Yeah.
And I always say is like I don't really think about it because I think if I start thinking about it, I'm going to get nervous, right?
Oh
That
wow.
oh shoot, I hope I don't mess this up. You know what I mean?
It
Or
puts more
like
pressure on you.
so again, a lot of times I'm just trying to focus on kind of like making like what is this story about? What are the characters about? And so how do I tell this story and and really bring out sort of like the characters in it. You know what I mean? And sort of
I
what
hear
these
you.
characters are going through, type of thing. And
Yeah.
so um, I feel like that sort of simplifies things for me. You know what I mean? And it prevents me from just kind of freaking out. Um, so yeah, I'm sorry, I don't have a great answer for you.
So
No. That's helpful.
so question on this. So then you would have to put the storyboard. So was you reading the script and then having to put the art and then put the storyboard in order the way it's supposed to come out? Is that your process?
Yeah, it's like as a director, right? And I can only speak in like TV and stuff like that, right? It's like you have a team of storyboard artists that you work with. You get a script, you read it, um, and oof, I don't know. I'm sorry. There's like things that are kind of going through my brain as far as because most of the time I feel like um, you're not in like the recording sessions, right, with the
Yeah.
actors, right?
Mm,
Except for in a couple like situations, right? So the first producer that I worked with when I was at Sony, right, his name is Audu Payton, right? He was generous enough to sort of like invite us to go into these recording sessions, right?
Oh wow.
So we could, obviously they would, you know, do the main directing, but you can kind of like pipe in every once in a while and kind of go like, hey, can they, that's not quite the read that I was kind of thinking as far as like, planning, like, sometimes it's like, situational things like, oh, I imagine this person to be like much further away. Can you project more? Like, what I mean? Instead of
Oh.
sort of saying such a, like logistic kind of stuff, right? What was the question again? I'm sorry. I'm like,
Oh, no, just basically like you're having to put those storyboards in
oh
order
yeah. I'm sorry.
with the artist that
Yeah.
they give you.
So it's like we're given a script and we read the script, we sort of put our thoughts on it, and then we have a team, right? And usually it's like you have a team of like 3 storyboard artists, right? And so then you have to sort of like divide up the script between these 3 people, and
Oh,
then they
wow.
basically, you talk them through kind of your ideas and stuff like that, and then they basically have to like do the storyboards for it. They give you the roughs, and then you make your notes, right? And so again, going back to the Popovich thing again, and this only kind of works, I feel like, in some of the older kind of things when you have like a longer, because production cycles are so short nowadays, whatever, like you don't get to work with your team very long, right?
Oh,
And
wow.
I was very fortunate, like the 2 places I worked with, I had long tenures at, right? Like when I was at Sony, which is, with Extreme Ghostbusters and all that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
for about 5 years, right? And then when I went to Warner Brothers, I was, for the most part, like I was there for like almost 25 years, right? And
Oh, wow.
so, in most cases, I have a team and I'm able to grow with them. Like one of my favorite stories is when I was on like the Batman and stuff like that. You know what I mean? When I first got there in like 2003, like
Yeah.
I loved my team, right? And again, like we still get together for drinks and dinner sometimes and hang out and stuff like that.
Oh,
We
nice.
talk about that time kind of because again, there was so much like growth and sort of like kind of getting on the same page of something, right? And that's the best thing is like we all kind of, it's like we can talk through things and they kind of get a pretty clear sense of kind of like how they're going to like build this thing, right? And then when they build it, it's just like, man, like it's so right, it's so right, it's so right. And so now we're just sort of like improving it, right? Versus like when you work with somebody that you don't know or you haven't sort of maybe you haven't you know laid out kind of like like your visual language kind of a thing, and they're doing things totally against like what you want, then you have to like reboard it, right? And so again, like
Yeah.
those are the most painful when it's just like I have to actually get in there and have to start reboarding things and stuff like that, right?
Oh, wow.
And so that happened a little bit obviously in Extreme Ghostbusters also, just because again I was so new, I sort of didn't super know what I was doing, and again I was just with a bunch of like I don't know, it's like new people and some old people, and not everybody was sort of suited for it, right? And so, again, it becomes a thing of like, if you have a really great team and if you're in sync with things, your job's really easy, right? But a lot
Yeah.
of times it's not, and you're having to sort of like redraw stuff like within a day, you know what I mean? Or you have to like draw enough so they can understand how to like reboard it, kind of a thing, right? And so,
Wow.
um, that's kind of the basis of it, the basics of it as a
So
Gotcha.
are you kind of the person that picks your team, or the team is given to you and you have to learn how to work with that team?
it's it's sort of like a sometimes it's a little bit of both, right? um Again, it's kind of like if you sort of built something that's kind of there, you try to get the guys that you kind of have, or at least that you're familiar with, right? But again, sometimes there's, as we talked about sort of like off camera, um there's like business stuff that happens, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes
Yeah.
you're just thrust upon. You know what I mean? You're just kind of like, well, here's your team, and then you're just kind of like, okay,
Wow.
let's figure it out then, kind of a thing, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so, luckily for me, and usually I say is like I need to at least be able to pick one guy, or one person. Sorry, not just a guy, but
Sure.
um, because I can kind of work with that, right? It's really difficult if you have like 3 people and you're totally not in sync and you have to reboard everybody's work.
Oh,
But
dang.
it's 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 doable if you have at least one person you can rely on. You know what I mean? And then you can kind of rework like 2 other
Wow.
people. Kind of thing. So again, that's the I don't know. That's why again, like I feel like going back to pop, like the coaching kind of thing and setting up a system and setting up, you know what I mean? That's very, very sort of like beneficial, because I feel like, especially in TV, you know, I'm only speaking in terms of like TV animation, right? It's like, I feel like um, you can have a career in it because your job is basically to, and I use this really bad analogy, is like you're just trying to get the boat across the channel, right?
Mm.
If you make it across the channel, that's successful, right? As an artist, it's like I would love to get the boat across the channel and look good, right? Like it's a
Yeah.
beautiful boat, and there's all these like things to it, and we're kind of maneuvering across the channel, and we're, you know, doing our cool things, right? But sometimes the only thing that they require is like it makes it across the channel. So sometimes it gets barely to it, and it sinks like as it's like landing, and it's got holes in it, and it's got like tin cans like holding stuff together, and tape and rope and band-aids. So
Oh
again, it's
man.
kind of like those are the obviously the ones where you're just like, at least we made it across the channel. You know what I mean?
It's wild. Let's go back a little ways, and I envy anybody who can draw, because I am completely no skill whatsoever. My stick people look terrible. Like, I got zero attributes in that category. When did you sort of either pick up drawing, or did you realize that you actually enjoyed it, or did you kind of start figuring out how to do different techniques? Like, when did all that kind of start for you?
You know, it's a, you know, of course, I get long-winded about this stuff because my brain is, I don't know, like looking at like looking at things in like different kind of ways. And it's, anyways,
Sure.
um, I'm probably going to go on to something else about it also, right? But even just at the beginning, right? Like I had very sort of stingy immigrant parents, right?
Okay.
And so they tried to save everything, right? So
Okay.
everything's about super efficiency, right? Like my dad would get mad at us if we left the lights on in a room that we weren't in anymore, type of thing, right? Using too much toilet paper, kind of stuff, right? Um,
We
so
all we all do that as dads, yeah.
he was a military guy also, right? And
Okay.
so
Oh
it
dang.
was a very strict, you know, kind of thing, right? We only had so
Sure.
much TV time, and most of the time, it's like again, like you know, I'm old, so again, like you know, my friends would have like Ataris or something like that, right? And we wouldn't, right? Like so, a lot of the times, like my poor sister and I, like we just had to just. So she ended up reading books, and I ended up drawing because we're so bored. Basically, it's just like we just had to sit in our room and just do our homework or something like that, or you know what I mean, go out and play with our friends or something like that, right?
Yeah.
And so, but obviously at the time, because there's no internet and all that kind of stuff, right? In the evening, you're kind of like, I can only watch TV for so long, whatever, and then I either got to do my homework or do something. Well, on weekends also sometimes too, if you're, you know, you know, you can't hang out with your friends or something like that. So I ended up playing like Dungeons and Dragons and stuff like that. Like, you know, I think I saw The Hobbit like when I was in middle school, like it had just sort of come out, and it blew my mind. And I ended up like just finding people that play Dungeons and Dragons also, and so that really sparked my creativity and my sort of thing about like, and you know, drawing characters for people kind of a thing, and reading a lot of sci-fi and you know comics and heavy metal, which we weren't supposed to do. Um, but that was like a big. I think a lot of it again is because I was bored, kind of a thing, right? Or like we weren't allowed to sort of like, you know, again, like I couldn't go to Disneyland or whatever, you know what I mean, all the time, or whatever, and I couldn't watch TV all day,
Yeah.
and so um, it was always sort of the fear of having to do homework, you know what I mean? And so I'm like, okay, I'm gonna finish my homework so I can do something, and so again, my sister read, I drew, and that's kind of it, right? And it kind of grew with the whole thing of like, you know, science fiction, you know, fantasy uh, stuff. You know, comics again. It was something you had to buy, so I only had like 2 comics, and I just like
Mm.
read
Oh
them over and
wow.
over again. But Dungeons and Dragons, which is free for the most part, right? Um, but it caused you to sort of have to create things, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So um, I always kind of say is like I feel like if I was a kid now, I never would have picked up a pencil because I would just be playing video games all the time. You know, But again, it was a thing whereas I wasn't allowed to do anything. So what do you do to sort of like fill your boredom kind of a thing, right?
Wow.
Wow.
So, um, but the odd thing about it is as I got older, also, I realized I don't really like drawing all that much. It's painful to me. It's hard, right? Like,
I know it's hard.
yeah, yeah. And it's also harder. I think it's because as you become an adult, especially if you have like a critical mind and stuff like that,
Okay.
it's like you know what's good, right?
Ah,
So and if you can't do it, you just give up because you're just like, I know I suck, and so I'm not going to do it, right? But because again, I get the question a lot of times of kind of like, is it easier to learn how to draw when you're young or when you're like older, kind of thing, right? The thing about when you're young is you don't know what's good and what's bad. You just draw because you love it, right? And so you can be just drawing absolute crap, but you keep doing it just because you enjoy it, right? I think
yeah.
Yeah.
as you get older, obviously it's like you will pick it up quicker because you're
Mm,
analyzing it and you're breaking certain things down and you're sort of like, but again, the thing that you always struggle with is just your expectations,
I see.
right? And so, um, but I think I realized later also that, you know, the sweet spot of like when you're the joy, like when you're in a zone and you're drawing and there's nothing better, right? That feeling of just like, I'm awesome and what I'm putting down is awesome and this thing's going to look awesome, But I feel like as I got older and older, and obviously I think now just with the internet, you see a lot of great work. You see how talented, there's some people that are so talented and I'm just like, I can't even approach that at this point. But I feel like also just kind of like, it's like I found it tedious in a way.
Oh
Do you know what I
wow.
mean? Especially like in comics or when you paint, especially if you're doing like photorealistic kind of stuff, right? It's kind of like I'm much more interested in like the compositions and the form and getting those things down. And then at this point, again, I'm just kind of done. I don't want to like shade it. I don't want to like, do you know what I mean? Like make sure the skin is smooth and the right color, and then, you know. And so I feel like the thing that kind of, and I realized this when I left Sony. I brought up Sony, right? Like Sony and Warner Brothers, right?
Yep.
Um,
Yeah.
so I left Sony during this time when Pixar was on the rise, right? And it was a time where basically even the animation union was telling everybody, you got to learn digital because 2D animation is going to die. Like 3D animation is the future, and you guys are all going to be out of a job if you don't learn 3D, right?
Wow.
And so I got into animation because I could draw. Do you know what I mean? And I liked the 2D animation feel of it, right? Um, and so I don't know. I had a friend that worked at like PlayStation or whatever like that, and they were just like, "Hey, you should, they're doing something a little different. They're looking for people that like, with a somatic, you know what I mean, like vision and stuff like that. You should apply, blah blah blah, whatever." I was like, "Whatever." It's like, just give me a portfolio. I ended up giving him a portfolio, and I actually got a job offer to art direct something. Right?
Nice.
So I left and I went, and you know, without getting it totally into that story, right? But like, it didn't quite work out just because of like the people that sort of had this path for me. They quit and they ended up going to like a different company, and so I was kind of in this thing where I just had to learn how to build stuff and whatever, right? Which I was terrible at, and I hated it. And I realized how much actually I don't really like drawing all that much, right? And I really missed animation. And I realized like what I love about the creative process is telling stories, right? I think maybe it's a lazy thing because it's like fandom, right? It's kind of like writing your own like fan fiction because again you have these things that are sort of like filled in for you, and then now you want to push pieces around, kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
And so there's a general understanding of it, but then it becomes a deep dive kind of thing, which I think extends into film also, which is kind of about like what is themes, right? The broad things like a theme, then it becomes about like I don't know, plot and character. Those are sort of two things. Like some are led by plot, some are led by characters. But
Yeah.
then going into the deep dive of how you craft something, you know what I mean? Like how do you sort of? I mean, one of the movies that I kind of worked on, I remember talking to Bruce Timm about, which is the Justice League versus the Fatal Five, right? I remember
Oh
he
yeah,
was
yeah.
asking, we were like in edit because he had a hard time wrangling the script to the way that he liked it. And I remember like we were almost done building. We're sitting in edit, and he was just like, It's like, I don't even know. I was like, I don't even know. Like, what do you think about this story? Like that, right? And I'm just like, I don't know. It's just like, but the thing that I do know is like, I love these characters, right? And I
Yeah.
love the journey of these characters because it was a thing about like mental health. And I remember just like
Yeah.
going like, I love what like Starboy is going through, and I love how, you know, Jessica Cruz, Green Lantern, what she's about, kind of a thing. And I love sort of like their story about how they meet and how it's kind of like this weird kind of thing, but then, this thing kind of happens, and then again, like the sacrifice thing at the end, kind of a thing, and then even somebody that's, which is a little bit in a weird way, and this is stuff that I kind of love, is like, I'm sorry, I'm jumping all over the place, but like
You're good.
Creature Commando, like the Weasel story kind of a thing, right? It's kind of like
Yes.
there's a thing that's, I think the easy thing is just kind of say like, okay, here's the pieces, and they go here and here, and then they have, this is the thing that happens, so I'm just going to say the thing that happens, right? And then it naturally goes to the places that I'm explaining what it does, right?
Yep.
But like the Weasel story is kind of a thing of like, how do you visually tell a thing where he's misunderstood, but as an audience, you understand he's doing this thing, and this is where all the misunderstanding kind of happens, and then he ends up kind of where he is, and even the ending of kind of like where he's dreaming, and he's doing this thing, and even his two best friends, Nina and the bride, they're just like, I wonder what he's dreaming about. And it's just like, he's probably just chasing squirrels, which is a total like an understatement of kind of like what is actually, you know what I mean?
Yes.
And nobody will understand it. Nobody will ever know, but the audience knows it now. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's just like,
Yes.
that's so, I don't know. It's many levels deep, right? and I love that stuff, right? So I don't even know where I am right now. So
No,
Well,
no,
you
yeah.
brought it up, so let's kind of
okay,
jump into it a little bit, and I hope you're okay with that, Ray.
Yeah.
yeah, no, I need,
Creature Creature Commandos, I feel like my only question for you is you get to work with James Gunn, who I feel like is one of the most talented creators out there. The guy's made me emotionally invested in CGI rabbits and raccoons, and I'm like, no, that's just, it's a gift. His skill is to get people to buy into whatever he's doing and talking about. So for you, he must have left a big impression. Like, talk to us about, what it's like kind of working with him, because you're directing parts of Creature Commando, so you have to be in tandem with James, I'm sure, and figure out like where his head's at and where the story's going and all that stuff. So like what is it like to kind of work alongside him or have those conversations regarding this project?
yeah, let me just sort of clarify a couple of things just off the
Sure,
top, right?
please.
Because again, like I work in TV animation for the most part, kind of a thing, right? And so I've never met James Gunn, right?
Oh wow.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And so we were just given his scripts, right? Um, and he sees what we do, and he gives us notes about it,
Mm.
Oh
right?
wow.
And so, um, yeah, these, I mean, I don't want to make it just seem like just because, what I mean, I worked on some projects, with him, right, or his scripts, anyways, that um, that I'm sort of hyping him up. But it's like everything that you kind of said um, is true, and just my experience again in not having sort of physically met him or whatever, it is that he chases. That is what he chases, right? And the sort of like, um, I guess, sort of subtle thing, right? Because I think a lot of people just kind of think like, he just likes crass stuff about like these like, you know, um, just like misfits, you know what I mean? And they're just
Yeah.
like doing stupid stuff and saying stupid things, whatever. Um, and I think a lot of people, they do get that like his stuff has heart, right? Like
Yes.
every single thing that he does, it comes from, sure, it's like a misunderstanding kind of a thing, right? But it's heart. And again, it's like he doesn't, it's like the thing that I was kind of saying, right? It's not like, hey, I'm going to basically say everything that I'm doing, kind of a thing, right? It's kind of like he's saying basically there's these like, you know, dumb, or just weird people kind of a thing. And it looks like they're fighting kind of thing, but actually they're spending time together and they're actually building something, right? And so when somebody does something that's like touching or whatever like that, you're like, oh, that relationship built, and that's a twist,
Yeah.
but I get it. Do you know what I mean? Because you explained a lot of stuff, right? Because like even though it's kind of like they're punching each other in the face or they're like yelling at each other and saying stupid things, whatever like that, but you've seen them getting hurt by sort of these personal. Maybe there's like a personal moment that he gets hurt by, and that subconsciously resonates with you, I think, as an audience. So then you're like, okay, there's a little bit of care that's happening there, even though it's like they're fighting like siblings or something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I don't know. Again, it's almost like subversive in a weird way. Do you know what I mean? And it's kind of like it's not that obvious like thing. And I think that a lot of people they see it and they just think that, oh, it's stupid. You know what I mean? And it's like random but I think everything
Well
is like
calculated.
purposely put into the moments that are in there, right? Again, we only have like 22 minutes or whatever it is, like of screen time to work on something like that, right? And a lot of times too, I'm just thinking like, okay, there's this weird silliness that's kind of happening, or this, and sometimes you're looking at this like just extra violence, you know what I mean? That's like, you know what I mean? Like just visual candy kind of thing, right? But his notes for the most part are always about moments, right? And especially like the
Oh, wow.
weasel thing, right? It's just, and this is the sort of rock and hard place that we kind of come into sometimes, right? Because again, like to me, I'm always looking at sort of like what is the personal relationship that's happening, right? And I want to extend everything, right? I remember like talking to like Bruce Timm even before, and he would tell me things like, Sam is like, this is deadly, right? You put all these like long holds in there, you know, and it's like deadly, right? And I'm just like, look, I don't do it in fighting. Fighting should be snappy and should be fast. You know what I mean? I was just like, but when somebody is saying something, you can't just make it into a speed bump. You gotta like sit in it. Do you know what I mean? And like
Wow.
it's gotta like resonate. So I don't know. Again, like it's his. I feel like again we're talking about sort of the same things, but his Bruce is like warning me as if I don't understand this kind of stuff, right? But again, the longer that we work together, and I think this is why, like again, I've worked with him for over 10 years, or like that, right? And I feel like I've directed most of these movies that are in the direct to video type of stuff, right? Is like whether they're successful or not, as an audience kind of a thing or whatever like that. I feel like for the most part, we're pretty happy with the product that we put out because
Yeah.
there's some sort of genuine thing that's in there. Do you know what I mean? And again, a lot of times too, it's just because again, these poor writers also they have to crank these things out so fast. Like you can't just come up with the Godfather in 1 week or 2 weeks or whatever like that and have a rough draft on like by the end of the third week or something like that. And so James, because of his stature and all that kind of stuff, right, will make you stop and slow down, right? But again, if you don't have that name behind you, what really they're going to tell you, like, just turn it in. What's wrong with you? You're going to get fired if you don't
Oh,
turn it in. Just turn
wow.
it in. Like, you're late. You're late. Now you're known to be late all this time, right? But you're like, it's not. But it's not right. There's like, look, there's a schedule or whatever, and then like, and you missed it. That's it, right? But James would be like, this isn't right. Stop and do it again, right? And
Wow.
then they're like, oh, okay, I guess we're stopping and doing it again, kind of thing. But I can't say that, right? Because I'm just gonna get fired. You know what I mean? And so I totally appreciate because again, it's a thing where it's like, okay, it's got to be within 20 minutes, 22 minutes, right? You're like, oh, you're over 10 minutes. You got to cut 10 minutes out of it, right? So a lot of times, especially if it's written in a way where there's too much information or it's like it's about some, you know what I mean? Like again, like you start cutting stuff because you have to squish it in the 22 minutes, right? And so again, I'm just, I basically make the first pass, I put it together, you know what I mean? And I deliver it, right? And then it's up to like, again, the producers and all that kind of stuff that kind of go like, we got to squish it down to this, blah, blah, blah. So they make the cut kind of a thing, right? So again, I understand why it was done, right? But again, in my mind, I remember just saying, I was just like, I think you've taken all the heart out of it, right? And so we turned in, James is like, you guys are missing the point, right? I'm just
Oh,
like,
wow.
can you just give it back to me and let me just. But again, it's like without James, that never would have happened, right? Because again, I think that episode is like 2 minutes longer than most of the other episodes, right? But again, it's because James basically is basically like allowing that or forcing that to happen, right? So I don't know. It was a thing that I just feel very lucky, right? Because again, like I think on that level, I don't think I could write that. Do you know what I mean? It's just that I understand it, and so I'm trying to sort of like honor it and hit because again, there's especially when you don't have because again, Weasel doesn't speak, right? So you have to show it. You can't say it. You can't cover things by just saying stuff, right? Because and again, a lot of it is kind of breaking it down of like what are we saying about him, right?
Yeah.
So all these things, it's just like I think it's important that he goes, and again, a lot of it's written of what James is. So I had written, right? He's afraid of fire. He jumps through the fire to save the girl, kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Again, it's incredible. Part of me was cursing it because it gets really complicated, but it's very specific, right? Like, how do you set up a misunderstanding? Do you know what I mean? Of again, the timing of kind of like the old man that sort of sees them playing, and then how do you show that it looks like he's attacking him, but they're just playing, so it needs to service both. And then how long? And again, the longer the dialogue is, you're like, I can only sustain this for so long because at a certain point you got to realize that they're just friends. They're not actually he's not actually trying to hurt them, kind of a thing, right? So it's almost like the less you see, the more potential of misunderstanding happens, right? So, anyways, it becomes these things of it's like, but the dialogue's so long. It's like, can we cut out of the dialogue sooner? Because again, the longer we're looking at this thing, the longer you can only sustain that for so long before what I mean. He's looking at her face, I think, right? Or you realize he's not trying to actually chew her arm off or something. So, anyways, it's kind of like he lets you explore it. You know what I mean? But he'll tell you right away. It's just like I like what I wrote better, so just go back to what I wrote, kind of a thing, right? But again, he allows you because there's things that like I don't know, one of the episodes, whatever, like when Weasel, I think it's the phosphorus episode when Weasel is like, what I mean? He's going to the castle. It's always kind of there was always supposed to be this thing where again, this is spoiler stuff. If you haven't seen it, like maybe you shouldn't listen.
They had their time. They had their time.
I know it's old, so but like the princess and the little girl are supposed to look like each other, and that's why the Weasel has this weird attachment kind of thing. So,
okay.
Like, his again, it's so I think well put together. It's like like just it's like they're escaping this thing, right? But then Weasel sort of gets lost, and he finds all these wolves. And it's almost like he becomes really close and friends with them. It's almost like he could live the rest of his life and be happy with this, right? But then something has to trigger him back to be like, I have to go find my friends I got to go save the girl that reminds me of But I'm just like, man, it's such a. It was like 2 episodes ago that kind of happened. I don't know. So I just kind of put it in of just like I had it so it's like because he's waking up basically from sleeping also, and then he just realizes like and he sees the castle, and then he's just like, there's something I need to do at the castle kind of thing, right? So I put in like a little dream in the beginning of just him playing, with. But again, it was subversive, so I made it really short. But then I think James, he saw it, and he's just like, I like that. He's just like, can you make it longer? Can you make it like where it's the at first it's the princess, or maybe it's the little girl, and then she turns into the princess, kind of a thing, right? Ooh. So again, it's kind of like it's not like he's just like it's my way or the blah 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 whatever, and how dare you whatever. It's just like he's after something. Do you know what I mean? And so I don't know. Again, like it's just super super admirable and super like I don't know. It's just like sort of a great thing that I kind of feel like just in my career because again, it's like. Especially back in the 90s, right, during the Extreme Ghostbusters stuff, right, it's like TV animation is just like cereal commercials, basically. Do you know what I mean? And it's like nobody really gives it any like deep thought or whatever the kind of stuff, right? And this is why I think I didn't really think that I would go into animation, when I was going to college and learning for it and stuff like that, right? But so I was never really into it. I was always trying to like, what's the point of it? Like, I think even like the dumbest toy kind of things is like there's a innate heart that's in there. There's a thing that's trying to sort of like come out, and then there's a dilemma that you're probably struggling with it or something, or you have to either overcome, or like whatever it is, like what is it like, let's identify that and actually sort of like bring that to the surface a little bit more, instead of it just being sort of this little speed bump that kind of happens.
Yeah.
No, I agree with you. Jeff Gomez, we just interviewed, and he talked about how back in that time frame, or even current, that they just want these IPs and get this stuff out real quick. There's no care on quality. It's just get it out by dates, get it out. And it seems like James Gunn, from what you're talking about, is he cares about it, and he wants to make sure that quality is good, and that it's not being rushed,
Yeah.
and people are going to get that story. And that's the same thing with Weasel. The character looks freaky. He looks like, yes, he's going to attack the girl, but he has heart, and
Yeah.
you can tell that the Weasel would sacrifice himself for her, and even it shows that in the story. And I feel that's what I feel with the Superman movie. I'm looking
Mhm.
forward to it, because I feel he's putting his heart into it. He
Yeah.
cares about what he's working on, and that's why. And yes, like you said, he has that weight behind his name, because he knows what he's doing. I mean, he's taking characters that were nobodies. I mean, dude, I hated John Cena. I could not stand John Cena. And no, I'm serious. I'm being honest up
Yeah.
there. People are gonna hate me about it.
I was sad when I got the Weasel episode, because I was just like, oh man, I hate that character, until I read it.
And that's the thing. I couldn't stand that. I couldn't stand Cena. And then when I saw him play, Peacemaker, I fell in love with the character. Like,
Yeah.
I literally loved his backstory. I loved everything about him. It was just, and it's kind of weird. I feel with the way James Gunn writes is that he wants people to relate, because everybody's not going to relate to Groot. So certain people are going to gravitate Groot, certain people are going to gravitate towards Drax. Each people are going to gravitate to certain characters. And like I said, Weasel, perfect example. And I kind of feel sorry for Weasel at a point, but at the same time, I care for him.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And you don't see that. Like, how can you care for a character that looks funny and whatever, but James Gunn, the way he writes it, makes it. And then, like you said, you made that little extra to give that extra story to it. So that's what you bring to the industry. And that's why we bring people like you on, because that little thing that you did made a big difference, because James Gunn liked what you did, and he said, hey, let's do a little bit more, and I feel you made a big difference in that one episode, because you took care of it. Like you said, you didn't like him, but then you ended up liking him.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like there's a lot of there's people that appreciate that kind of stuff, right? And I think
Yes.
that not everybody that sort of works in the industry really understands it, right? And it's like, if it's not in the script, they won't necessarily. You know what I mean? Here's like another thing too, just really quick. Maybe it's not so quick because I'm always long-winded, but there's a thing that again, like, I worked on this Batman Harley Quinn thing, right? Which I guess most people hate it. I didn't super understand it either, right? Like, but Bruce is after a certain kind of thing, and it's not the only thing, but there's a side of Bruce that's kind of after something, right? And there was a scene in that thing which was this really weird, subtle kind of thing, right? Oh, basically, there's like I don't know if you guys had seen it, but there's a scientist, right? That's kind of like caught up in the thing, and this explosion happens, and and he's gonna die, right? So there's a dialogue that Harley has with him. He's like, I'm dying, whatever, and she's like, my grandmother was, dead too, and I hope you see her. And she goes off on this like weird kind of story, kind of a thing, right? But she's actually really touched by it, right? And then when he dies, she's really like, oh, I hope you see you say hi to my grandma or something like that, right? But it's so, and I was just like, wow, that's a really interesting kind of thing, right? But in the Suicide Squad movie, I feel like James Gunn did something that was similar to that when she was going to get married to that, that drug lord guy,
Yeah.
whatever, right? That's like, she was explaining, I don't know, something, and she ends up killing him.
Yeah,
and she goes off in this really weird story that only makes sense to herself or whatever. And I was just like, I don't think most writers would sort of understand that, right? Because again, Bruce is like, the person that created, Harley, right, or one of the, and Paul Dini, right?
of course.
Yeah.
And I was just like, that's such a weird, I don't know, but a nuanced thing that I don't think anybody's going to remember and everybody's going to get, right? Or they're just going to be like, this is a weird thing. But when I saw it in like the Suicide Squad movie, I was just like,
Wow.
he tapped right into that aspect of her, you know. Um,
And there's not any other characters you can sort of pick out that would do something similar. Like
yeah,
Harley's very specific, uh, a character that you could pull that off with, and it makes sense for her,
yeah,
but not many other characters out
yeah,
in just entertainment.
yeah. It's kind of like it. It's an understanding kind of like how it's like what a peek actually into a window of kind of like how her brain kind of works. It's crazy and it's all over the place and it doesn't whatever, but she genuinely believes in this, and that's why she killed the drug lord kind of guy, right?
Yeah.
And you're kind of like, well, why was she there in the first place? What was she? You know what I mean? Again, like the logic stuff doesn't really matter anymore. It's just
Yep.
how did she
Yeah.
feel, and that's what got her there, and then this is what got her out, and that's how her brain works, kind of a thing. You know what I mean? Like, I don't
Exactly.
know.
Yeah. No, the story. Yeah.
Yeah,
She's unique.
yeah,
Creature
uh,
Commandos is, as we all were told, sort of the start of the new DCU. Of course, James Gunn, he's got his creative team
yeah.
that's done the whole blueprint and the past and all that. And so I'm paying really close attention to Creature Commandos because things can tie into live action and TV shows in the future and all that stuff. And so I was really surprised that we were getting these sort of glimpses into the future, these almost like nightmarish
yeah.
dream sequences where we would see heroes and members of the Justice League slain, impaled by whoever really. And I'm just wondering, are we as fans meant to take away some of these elements from Creature Commandos, like along with us? Like they could possibly come back, or we might get similar references to those type of situations, or do you think Creature Commandos, like we can only really focus on stuff within that realm, and we might not, see stuff like that kind of cross over into live action?
I think he had said basically like everything is on the table, right?
Ah,
Everything he sort of puts on the, you know what I mean? But
He didn't say what though.
yeah, and again, even with this whole thing, right? It's a premonition, right? So it becomes
right.
an unreliable. You know what I mean? It's
Mm,
not going to be 100% factual kind of thing, right? Is it?
sure,
So again, it's like I feel like there's a lot of like wiggle room there, but fans will want to lock like, oh, this is the thing, so but just like, but it's a premonition. You know what I mean? And did
sure.
that whole thing get averted because she got killed, kind of thing? Do you know what I mean? Like, was
Yeah,
that just one possible future or not, or is that the definitive? You know what I mean? So again, it's like there's a lot of like outs. Do you know what I
I
mean?
hear you.
And so again, it's kind of like it may be like definitely I don't know because I have no idea what it is. But I don't know. I would guess also that I don't think that he would kind of know, right? Because I don't know. It's very interesting, right? Because and I don't know how exactly obviously James Gunn works, right? It's like my experience with like say like a Brandon Vietti and like a Young Justice, right? Um,
Great
and
guy.
and Greg Weisman, right? I feel like the way they approach a project versus like Bruce Timm and a Paul Dini, right, or a James Tucker, right, it is very different in how they sort of approach things, right? Like I know James, I feel like James and Bruce are kind of like there's these stories that are kind of interesting to me, and I'm going to tell them, and there's certain things we're just going to throw it out there, right? We may come back to it, we may not, right? I know for sure, like in some of it's like I can't remember which Teen Titans one it was, but at the end, again, it was written that it was going to be Blackfire at first, right? But then it became this thing of, because of, oh, it's Jewish contract, of kind of how it is. He was just like, you know what makes more sense is like, let's have this thing of like the guy that looks like Jericho awakens again, so maybe he is Jericho, right?
Mm.
And so he's kind of like, we may use that, we may not, kind of a thing, right? Whereas like the Young Justice people, it's mapped out, you know, on like graphs and post-it notes all over the place and diagrams, and you know what I mean? Like when they, so there's some people that build it where it's like, it's got to be all figured out like from the beginning. But
Right.
then there's going to be parts too where you're like, oh, that doesn't quite, whatever, then we got to look at, but they want to minimize that, right? Whereas like other people are, is kind of like, this is the main stories we want to tell, and this is the story we want to tell anyways, right? We're not trying to cloud it with any kind of stuff, but then here's some stuff, right? We may or may not revisit it again. But those are two sort
Wow.
of very different kind of ways of sort of like creating a world, you know? And so obviously I don't know what James is, but I would think that it's because, again, like he's not going to be directing every single movie, right?
No, he can't. Yeah.
He's got to basically orchestrate, like he's got to create basically a sandbox that people can be creative as well.
Right.
And so I have a feeling he's probably not going to be that exact about it, right?
I hear you. I
That's
know
just,
you. I know you only worked on part of the season for Creature Commandos, but I always feel like there's either Easter eggs or like references to stories or arcs that just go right over fans' heads. Was there anything that you can remember that you guys had to put into an episode, an artifact or something, a weapon that fans might not have caught with their eagle eyes?
you know, it's again, it's a lot of times like that type of stuff is like fun, but
Mm,
I don't love those things.
yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like again, I am just trying to like service the story, and I'm trying to service these characters because I don't know. And I don't know if it's maybe like a Bruce Timm thing, but like I remember again, he hates that stuff, right? Like he is just like, don't do that. He's like, if you do that, I'm taking it out, you know. Um, and so um, I don't know. Again, like some people, they get off on it, Gods and Monsters, right? The Justice League Gods and Monsters, whatever, right? Which
Yeah.
is an alternate kind of
Yeah.
thing where there's a vampire Batman, and you know uh, the Latino Superman. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, and was it the Fourth World, like Wonder Woman? You know, and is the Fourth World? I might be missing fourth something. Like I remember we were talking about, you know, some things that could be there. Like again, like when this, you know, the Superman ship crashes and then Lex is there, kind of a thing, right? Like there was a truck that was supposed to be there, right? And we're all going like, well, we should put Ma and Pa Kent there, but they were not able to go down there, kind of a thing. Like that's a thing that, you know what I mean, that got averted, you know,
Okay.
Oh wow.
because you know he got picked up by basically the immigrant family that was, you know,
Yeah.
and you know the whole thing of, you know, even in the ice, like, oh, that should be Mr. Freeze or something like that, you know what I mean? But again, I can't remember what he, maybe that one was written in there already, but the Ma Pa Kent thing is just like, don't do it. It's like, it's just some dude.
I got
So,
you. I
Oh
got you.
man.
but anyways, like those, I don't know. It's just weird to me because sometimes, and again, like in Red Sun, right? To me, is just like I don't know. I mean, I think it's just me, but like the whole thing of like it being like a loop of the cycle, like that wasn't as intriguing to me, kind of a thing.
Mm,
And actually, I didn't even like it because again, to me, it just means that it has to repeat itself. It's like this is a cycle that's unbreakable, right? And I kind
yeah.
of like, I don't know. To me, I'm just like, it's kind of depressing in a weird way, right? It's tricky and it's clever, but I don't know if I like it as sort of a real story element kind of thing, because it just means that you're locked in this loop, right?
Yeah.
That, you know, it's
You
like
get different
go to the
outcomes.
past and then you basically go to the same future and then you're gonna go to the past again, and then it's just gonna repeat itself, kind of a thing. And I don't know, I just kind of didn't think, plus it was a production nightmare because again, it's like, again, I feel like I've been called into the office so many times of just like, you have too many like backgrounds, you know what I mean, that they have to design. And so, again, a flashing forward as far as like generations of it's like one image, you know, that you're going to spend like 10, like five, no, 3 seconds on maybe, whatever, and then it's done kind of thing. And they're just like, versus like, oh, you have an environment that you designed basically, but there's actually acting in it, and we're going to be on there for like 5 minutes or something like that. So,
Yeah.
anyways, outside
Wow.
of that production sort of limitation or like that, just story wise, I was just like, I don't know, I don't love it. I think it's clever, but I don't know. I don't
Wow.
like the
So
fact that
everybody's different.
I like
That's
the
crazy.
potential of it being a better world and all that kind of stuff, and not that it's going to become a better world, and then they're going to, basically do the Krypton story where the planet, is breaking apart, and then do it again.
Wow.
You know?
Mm.
But I even get the premonition part that you were saying. I mean, you think about it, like if you look at Star Wars, Anakin's having these premonitions of seeing Padme crying and screaming. He's thinking she's dying, and in reality, it's her giving birth to
Right?
Luke and Leia. But in his mind, he's seeing it as she's dying, and he wants
Yeah.
to save her. So I get your premise, what you're saying about James Gunn. It's a premonition. It's not officially that that's what's happening. So I get you.
Yeah, and I think also that they're kind of hard to do, especially when you have to play with other directors and other stories. You know what I mean? And I think it's like comics, right? It's kind of like these characters keep coming back because again, it's kind of like like
You
to tell a
can't kill them
compelling
all.
story, they gotta like die or something like that, right? Or some kind of like finality has to happen. But then if you want to write another story about them, you got to bring them back again. So that's always why I don't know, like characters' histories are so
Oh
insane
yeah.
or like kooky and like just weird sometimes.
That is true.
Is there an animated movie? I'm curious about this because it feels like for the last 10 years, DC has been putting out so many stories that you thought would never see the light of day in like an animated form. When they announced like The Killing Joke, I was like, wow, that's amazing that they're gonna try and pull that off.
Yeah.
Um, is there any projects you were part of where you thought it's crazy that we're gonna be, embarking on this journey trying to put this to screen, or anything that you guys had to work on that just you faced so many obstacles, or you just never thought you were gonna make it to the end?
You know, actually, I think a lot of them is very they're very painful to build, right? Um, I think like some others, I don't necessarily want to like name drop, right? But some other sort of prominent directors that have gone through the WB thing, but I think just in general, and in especially like sort of the TV animation kind of thing, right? Is like, if people only actually knew sort of how difficult it is to sort of make these kind of things, and sort of like, like I don't know, it's going to sound like cocky and arrogant and stuff like that, but sometimes there's like these things have no right to look as good as they do. Do you know what I mean? Or as edit together as well as they do, because I mean, I can't tell you the amount of times that, you know, personally, but also sort of people that I know have said like, I want to take my name off this thing because
Wow.
like this looks like absolute trash, you
Wow.
know.
Wow.
But it always edits together okay. Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean? It's still not perfect, but if you there's one that I actually blacked out because I was so just like, we're so screwed on this thing, and I don't even know where to begin to sort of, you know. Um, I think these are hard because again, there's like every fan, right? There's a sort of a love and an ambition of kind of what this thing could be, but when you're actually building it, sometimes there's too much information to build. Like my last one, right, which is the Doom that came to Gotham, right, which is something that basically I wanted to do, right. Um, and I feel lucky enough to do it. But there's just way too much story in it. It's kind of like there's too much information in it, and I knew sort of towards the middle of it, and towards the end, I just was just like, I don't even know what to do with this because there's too much stuff. I can't give it enough screen time to actually
Oh,
fill
dang.
everything. There's just too much information. I think Killing Joke also, you know what I mean? Like I wasn't, I was just a director on that, right? But it's a complicated story, and even kind of like, I mean, I get it. Like the fans too. When I first read the script, I was just like, what, And so there's some things I try to minimize, and there's things I try to sort of, press more, right? Like I was really trying to make it basically it's like they're mirror stories of each other in a way, right? Not really necessarily a direct mirror, right? But it was like the first half was about Batgirl, and I really wanted to make it a descent into the abyss, right? And so in the beginning, but again, I feel like I didn't have enough time or enough. I couldn't. Again, a lot of these things I have to do subversively, right? Because I don't know. I don't think like a lot of people like to get into these deep conversations. Oh, what happened to Ted? Did he drop out?
I think his camera went out.
I was
He'll probably plug back in. Yeah. But so then the Killing Joke you had to do, so you had to kind of balance out. Because on the editing part, I kind of see what you're talking about because I have to edit some of my videos that I put together, and you got a bunch of B-reel, and you're having to. This looks cool, but you have to fit it within this time frame. So you got to cut trim pieces here and there to make it fit. But if you take too much of this, it's gonna affect this. So and I see your problem that it's like you want to tell the story correctly, but you're minimum to what you could put in.
Yeah,
It seems hard.
and it becomes a thing which fans hate, right? Where you're like, there's too many things, so I got to start cutting moments out because it's
Yes.
kind of covered here, right? And then fans hate that, right? But
Yeah.
you're like this because I feel like again the Doom that came to Gotham, right? I try to run as much stuff together and I just do it faster, right? And so I think people just got lost, right? Because they're just like, I don't even know where I am right now because there's too much information, right? Where again, I should have just cut sections out of it and be able
Ah,
to sort of tell these stories slower, right? And
Yeah.
so I don't know. In my mind, I felt like I could do it, right? I could abbreviate certain things, right? But again, it's there's elements of that story that I love so much, right? Like I really wanted to like, I feel like it still looks really good, um, and I feel there's something there, right? But again, I knew it was a hard sell because it's, cosmic horror, which inherently lacks humanity, right? And so it's not a human story, right?
Yeah.
But there sort of is. I mean, I think Lovecraftian fans will argue that it's not Lovecraft, it's not sort of Lovecraftian enough because there is hope still, right? And Batman, oddly enough, is the hope kind of a thing, right? So again, it's a weird hybrid, but again, there's just too many events because there's too many flashbacks and there's too much history to sort of tell, right? And so
Yeah.
I feel like I could get away with certain things, and we did as much as we could. There's parts that we boarded, parts that we animated that we cut because again, it's just like this is getting too long and it's getting
Wow.
tiring to watch. Um, so again, that thing I think it needed to be a two-parter, you know what I mean, or a series, which
sure.
I'm sure nobody would want to have wanted to watch it. I would though. I just like the story. Um, but it's these things that you're put into, right? You're kind of like, hey, here's your next project. Um, sometimes they have a story. Sometimes it's like, hey, well, what story do you want to do? And then it becomes a thing like, okay, here's an idea. And then as you start laying it out, you think like, okay, that should work. But then when you start building yours, like, man, there's too much stuff here, or there's not enough stuff here, kind of a thing, right?
Yeah.
Or you're like, I'm trying to tell a different story now because, like, again, going back to Killing Joke, it's kind of like I really tried to make it where it's kind of like when you see Barbara in the beginning, it's like she was at the height of her career. She's like loving life. She's kicking ass. She's working with Batman, and she just feels like I'm a badass vigilante kind of thing, right? And I'm like having fun, right? And then she meets a psychopath that basically could have like gassed her, and who knows what would have happened. You know what I mean? Um, like stuff that dangerously can put her into this thing, right? Then it becomes personal, right? Where it's just like I'm going to kill this guy or whatever, or like this guy is whatever. You know what I mean? Then she starts going down into the abyss kind of thing, and then the tricky part that I don't know, it seems to be a thing, and I don't know if it ever works, but it reminds me of like Highlander, right? It always seems like there's like some kind of weird violence that happens, and then they have sex. You know what I mean? And so um, I don't super understand it, but I've seen it in quite a few movies, right? So I try to kind of get away from that, but I understand it's a part of basically about you're in the abyss and you're making bad decisions now, right? And that's what Batman is warning you against. Is like you are
Yeah.
compromised right now because you're not thinking straight and you're potentially like going to ruin the mission kind of a thing, right? But then he ends up sort of being part of it too. So I know it gets into this weird, tricky gray area, right? But we did try to redeem her in the fact that she doesn't kill Paris Franz, right? And it's not
Yeah.
Batman that stops her. I remember like again having this discussion with Bruce just about like she has to sort of be the decision maker. He can't be like, don't do it kind of a thing, right?
Yeah.
He's so damaged, he's just watching her and she's like she comes to it on her own, the decision on her own, and then she gives up the costume where she was able to get out of the abyss. And I feel like that was the story, right? Because and then it becomes about Batman kind of reflecting that I have my own Paris Franz and it's Joker, and I need to sort of like, and that's what begins the novel, the original novel of like, because to me it was always like, why would Batman ever go into have this conversation with him? When did he become this like sensitive about like, we
Yeah.
need to stop this or else somebody's going to kill each other kind of thing. Like, you know
Yeah.
what I mean? And so again, I kind of felt like it was a personal thing that's kind of like she kind of like did her journey, and then he's kind of like, you know, Joker is kind of like the Paris, Paris Franz for her kind of a thing. And it's just like, yeah, I'm in the abyss and I need to sort of get out of the abyss kind of thing. It was never going to be a perfect kind of thing because I don't know how one would really, unless you're just the first part of it just becomes just a support thing for the Killing Joke movie. But even the Killing Joke kind of thing is so ambiguous at the end. Does he, does he kill Joker or does he not kill Joker kind of a thing? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And I don't know, like it's an interesting question, but I just don't know how great it is as a I don't know, like some cinematic kind of like feel good movie or kind of like deep existential question kind of thing, right? It's neat as a fan thing, and I think this is why like nobody wanted to touch it. I mean, Killing Joke has been on the table since the mid 2000s.
I bet. Yeah.
Wow.
No, and Bruce didn't want to touch it. Nobody wanted to touch it, right? But again, I think it's this thing that because it's such a notable book, and it was problematic back then, that certain people kept broadcasting or highlighting it, and then I feel like Bruce was kind of forced into this thing. It's like we got to do it because again, like the home video people, I don't think they're fans of it, right? They're just kind of like, oh, we just know that people keep talking about Killing Jokes. We got to make Killing Joke kind of a thing, right? And then it's just like, okay,
Wow.
fine, like we'll do it this. But again, like I think like anybody, I think fans even know, like because again, like even when I have a writer friend, right? And I remember when we were doing it, he was just like, but the question is like, does this need to be made? Like, why does this need to be made? It's highly problematic,
Dang.
even back then, you know? And so we're just like, yeah, we agree. Like nobody wanted to do it because again, like, but I don't know. People keep pushing it, like they really want to see it. I don't know. Anyways,
You see fans, they actually do listen to us and they actually do projects because we want them and to their detriment, you know what I mean? So we stop saying they don't listen to the fans.
yeah,
Clearly, that's not true at all.
but a lot of times too,
Yeah.
we're helping you out by not doing the thing. Okay, here's another thing. When I was at Marvel, right, just really quick.
Yeah.
I remember we were trying to figure out like what to do for this one thing because something fell through, right? And they were talking about like the Thor Better Ray Bill story, right?
Oh yeah.
Again, like that was the thing, like that was the arc that got me into like reading Thor, right? Again, like it was the first Walt Simonson thing. Again, like I followed that all the way through the Frog Thor thing and whatever, right? Um, it was cool as a fan that understood what Thor was about, but as a story for Thor, if that was just about Thor, it is a terrible story.
Mm.
It's like he is so emo, right? He loses everything. He loses twice. His dad has to save him. He loses his girlfriend, and then he's the like, I'm the mighty Thor kind of a thing at the end, kind of a thing. You know what I mean? It's a
Yeah.
terrible, and he's whining about how, oh, woe is me, like I suck and I don't whatever. And his dad has to basically give him an out, you know? And so I was just like, I don't think this is a I love this just the comics, right? But again, and just sort of going back as far as like it's a single kind of, just an entity within one movie kind of a thing. It's not a strong Thor story, And then we
No.
talked about also doing a thing of like the death of Odin kind of thing. And it's just all these people sort of like telling stories about Odin and whatever like that. But you're like, but as a story, you don't see what Odin. Why was he so great? Why are these people crying about this, right? And I'm just like, it's not a good contained story.
Yeah.
You got to
I hear you.
see why people care about it. And then when he dies, that's when you feel something. You can't just be like, oh no, take my word for it. He was a great guy, you know?
Wow.
So anyways, I think that's there's a lot of things that again, fans will fight you about. Like again, like there's some guy that actually was a fan of my work, but he's on Twitter that he liked the Planet Hulk thing, but he was just like, my only complaint is like, you didn't do the sort of like, World War Hulk, whatever. I'm just like, that's a whole other story. We
Yeah.
want to cram two of those stories into like 1 hour. And it's like, you will hate it. It's just like, no,
Yeah.
I would love it. And I'm just like, you understand the pacing is going to be so screwed up that you're not going to care about any of it. But, but he was
Wow.
like, you couldn't be convinced otherwise. And you're like, okay,
That's wild.
yeah.
Well, for fans
Dang.
who don't know, like making these movies, just anything in animation is hard. It's difficult. It's teams of people working in tandem to try and come out with one coherent project. Have you ever felt, and I know because how difficult it is from talking to like voice actors, and we've talked to writers and we've talked to animators, is there any project you've done where you felt the end result was just perfect, like you could not have done anything more? Um, it either it went smooth or it just turned out exactly how you wanted to? Anything on your extremely huge list of successful projects that you felt that way about?
You know, I feel like again, just because of you know, the conditions that we're working in, it's like the animation could always be better in like any of it, right? I think the best looking one is the Crisis on Two Earths. I think that was the sort
Oof,
of,
nice.
as far as like consistency or whatever, I think it's pretty high, right? Um,
Wow.
I think the older ones, I think a lot of it has to sort of do with just sort of like, the overseas houses and stuff like that. Like there would always be at least like a good, I don't know, 5 minutes of like really good animation, and then the rest of it's just kind of like, it kind of works kind of thing, right? Um, I just kind of feel like we haven't gotten much of that lately. Like we don't get even like a sweet, you know, um, part of it as much. But I think it's just because there's so much work that's being done right now. You know what I mean? And just the talent is being spread super thin. Um, so I think again, given that, and again, this is going to sound like weird, but it's like I think the death short that I kind of did but I think that was very, very close to me, right? And so again, like I think the animation of that is good. Like in parts, there were like really good animation, but there's parts that it was kind of bad animation also. And again, it's kind of I don't know. This is like nobody Action Adventure is going to hire me again, but that's my thing, right? It's just like I love those emotional kind of things because there's no fighting in it at all, right?
Yeah.
And it's a very, I don't know, it's kind of an emo story. It was almost like I know like the whole Neil Gaiman thing is not very popular right now, so that's a weird thing. But again, when I was in high school or whatever, I kind of made it for my high school self when I was
Mm,
or early college self when I was reading like those books and kind of what I kind of got from it, kind of a thing, right?
wow.
I'm sure it seems incredibly naive. You know what I mean? Like the concept of, you know, you know, self pity and sort of like lost sort of ambition. You know what I mean? And how bad your life has become, type of thing. Um, but I felt like it was, again, it was very sort of thick, and again, it was a thing like where I had to cut down a lot of kind of things. But I feel like the pace, and I love and the music, like Freddie Weedman again, like the soundtrack on it is so good. Like I still get emotional every time I listen to it. So I think for me, because I feel like, I think I just realize as I'm older now, right? It's just like I just want to feel something. Do you know what I mean? It's like
Amen.
and I think that I resonate, and I remember things even as a kid of the things that made me feel something, you know? And so I just kind of feel like that's what I feel like I trust now is like, I just want to feel something, and I just want things that I appreciate are the ones that make me feel something. If that makes sense. You know?
Perfect sense.
Yeah.
We just talked to a producer recently, and we all, us during the interview, agreed that the stories, whether it's TV or film or animation, the stories that emotionally resonate with us, where we're emotionally invested in the most, are the ones that stick with us.
Yeah.
And I brought up the fact that I will never forget walking out of Infinity War,
Mm.
and the crowd is dead silent. Nobody was talking. All 200, 300 people in the theater walked out dead quiet. And I thought it was the most amazing
Yeah.
moment,
Yeah. Yeah.
ever, and I will never forget that feeling. Just dead silence, everybody just draw jaw on the floor.
Yeah.
No one knew what to say, no one knew how to react.
Yeah.
We've not experienced this on a big screen. Sure, good guys have lost before, but they've not lost on this level
Yeah.
ever,
Right.
and we didn't know how to handle that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
man, did I enjoy that moment. Just
Yeah.
like, wow, this is astonishing. We're never gonna feel this again.
Yeah.
You can't replicate this moment,
Yeah.
really.
And different and lesser degree, right? It's almost like The Dark Knight, also, right? Is like the end of that, which is a loss, but it's
Yes.
an acceptance, right?
Thank you. Yep.
I feel like, again, like I don't know, I just remember getting into like discussion slash argument with like some of my coworkers or whatever back then, right? Which I'm just like, I don't know. The more and more I watch that movie, the less I like it because there's so many obvious ham-fisted things about it. But I was like, but
Yeah.
I get like when you see this for the first time, especially that ending and just the sacrifice and the, her- the heroism of taking a loss and sort of like going into exile and sort of accepting it because it's for the great, like that's top notch like superhero stuff, right? um, and so
It's top tier.
yeah, it is, and this is the other thing just about I think why these things are so difficult, right? Because it's kind of like it when you see it, but it's a thing where you're subconsciously or consciously understand that when they say these things, it's because of the scene back here that makes that it references kind of. Do you know what I mean? Like in its, and I apologize for this because again, this is probably going to be I don't know. I'm just bringing this up for analysis, right? But
Go
I
for
kind
it.
of feel like again, like the whole like Superman, the Zack Snyder Superman thing. Like, again, I always kind of like talk about the whole thing of like, you know, you can trust me because I'm from Kansas line, right?
Hmm.
It's like that works in the Donner way because you've set up what Kansas is like, and Kansas means, Bible Belt, farmland, simple honor, those types of things, right? The wholesomeness and the goodness of people, right? But in the Snyder movie, right? And this is not a slight on him because I think visually he's like a master. Like I feel like 300 is like unmatched visually,
Oh, yeah.
especially that slow mo choreography kind of thing. Is just like I don't think anybody's ever done better than that.
Never.
But when he says Kansas in that movie, to me, I think of different things. I think of
Mm.
lying to people. I think of keeping, you know what I mean, like your secrets hidden, even at the expense of other people's lives. You know what I mean? So that doesn't mean anything to me. You know what I mean? So again, I feel like a lot of times when you're, you know, especially when you're trying to like, you know, do go through the approval process, you know, and you have a small sequence and it's this shot to this shot to this shot, and people are gonna be like, well, I don't know, like I don't think that shot's important, right? But you're like, but this is a keystone that it's gonna trigger something later. Right now on its own, it seems unimportant. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Again, it's like the weasel kind of thing, right? It's kind of
Yeah.
like we already see that they're running through the fire, right? I think, but I was just like, but he has to get separated from the girl, and he's got to make a conscious decision to go and grab her before he leaves, because that says something about him, right?
Yep.
It's
Yep.
it's not just about the fire. He gets shot. I'm hurt, and I was like, he's got to get shot multiple times because he's got to be like, it's just it's not the once is not enough. It's got to be like, no, you're taking more, and you're going down, 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 and you are like, your body is disintegrating at this point, and you still do it, right? Because it's about the repetition of that. You know, once is not enough, kind of a thing, right? Because again, once it's just, you know, but then you got to be like, you got hit again, and you're like hurt, and you're still getting up. You're still getting up. It's like the Superman Doomsday fight is like they never give enough time for it, and that's why, like again, the Superman Doomsday thing. I was so thankful that Peter Tomasi, who I think wrote the script for it, gave us the whole third act, which is just about the fight, so he can get worn down. We can, because Superman's like the invulnerable man, right? It's like you got to see that.
Yeah.
You can't just get taken out in three punches because you only got like 2 seconds, 2 minutes for this fight.
Exactly.
You gotta see that he keeps getting like he keeps getting up and gets worn down. He keeps getting up and gets worn down,
It's
and
got
he
to be
gets
stakes.
yeah. And it's I don't know. There's these things again. It's hard to sort of explain or sort of like debate because again, you're just looking at like, oh, he's gonna punch your face. That looks like a really hard hit. Like, yeah, that's enough. You're like, no, he's got to take 10 of those, you know. And so,
Nice.
anyways, I just kind of feel like again, it's like a weird directing. Sometimes is a weird kind of thing, right?
Wow.
It's a and again, sometimes you're going off of a feeling, right? Or you're going off of some sort of like you're like this is experientially this is what it is, you know. You're like, but I don't
It's
quite
probably
know.
hard to convey sometimes, though.
Yeah, yeah. And again, there's just so many other things that sort of again like because I think you've seen this in movies too. It's kind of, and I've seen this in plenty, right? Where you're like, this is like the death. This is supposed to be an important death, a moment of somebody's death that's supposed to resonate to somebody, but they go through it so quick. It just I don't even like feel it. Do you know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
just it's kind of like okay, that person died and he had a really pained look on his face, but then we just moved on to the next thing. Like we don't sit in it, and I don't know. Again, like there's just something about like I think movies. It just takes time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And again, I think a lot of times like that pace and that sort of understanding of what you know how people receive information and what sort of like sticks with them. Kind of, I think it's a hard it makes it difficult to sort of like work if you don't talk to somebody that understands it. Again, like I feel like again, that's why I'm so thankful to have a James Gunn. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, or Bruce Timm. You know, I mean, Bruce and I
Nice.
sort of fought a lot in the beginning, but you know what I mean, or just he, Bruce is an interesting guy because I'm a technical kind of guy, right? I
Okay.
like to break things down and I like to sort of like you know study and that type of stuff. But and there are other people that are like this, but Bruce is totally like a gut guy, right? Like he doesn't really know how
Wow.
to. I feel like he doesn't like articulate things like super well, but he is like so good at like the feel of an edit of like what is necessary, and I feel like his very sort of like underappreciated or sort of under talked about in things like that. You know, he's just got a really good sense. You know, um,
Wow.
so
That's crazy. James Gunn is the man. James Gunn, Bruce Timm. I mean, Tim, Paul Dini. To me, I look up to those guys because without Tim, we wouldn't have had Batman the Animated Series.
yeah,
Without Paul Dini, we wouldn't have had that as well. But then we wouldn't have had Mr. Freeze, we wouldn't have had Harley Quinn. Well, Mr. Freeze was already there, but the story he gave us in Batman the Animated
Yeah,
Series, we
yeah,
wouldn't have had that. And, the Harley Quinn itself. I mean, if you can tell, I mean, I'm just a little bit of a Harley Quinn fan, not that much, but, you know, but if it wasn't for Paul Dini and Bruce Timm, I wouldn't have any of that stuff. I mean, I
yeah.
fell in love with Harley in the Batman Animated Series. So, yeah, those guys' stories are great.
Can you express, because I've loved watching the animated series, the Batman, when I was growing up,
Mm.
and then I don't think animation, especially TV shows, I don't think they really like evolved for me until I started watching Young Justice
Oh, yeah,
and Greg and Brandon. They started incorporating elements that I feel like, I wasn't really privy to, especially in the superhero genre. Like the animated series, for all of its greatness, there were emotional moments, but there was also no death ever, really,
yeah,
or it was rare to see someone that might be,
yeah,
But Young Justice, they really sort of went out of their way to kind of break barriers with the human emotion and loss, and in later seasons they started dealing with mental health and
yeah,
depression and like all of these things. I'm just like, wow, it's amazing that they're really going out of the way to incorporate sort of all these different facets. And I know you worked, I think, only on the fourth season, but was there anything that you specifically remembered or took away from working with Greg and Brandon on the Young Justice series, which I still think is one of the greatest shows of all time? But anything that you kind of took away or just stuck with you with, working with those guys?
yeah. I mean, um, like what you said about like Batman the Animated Series, it's kind of like you know, a product of its time, right?
Yeah.
Again, like Batman the Animated Series broke so much ground, so
Yeah.
many barriers with that in such a subversive way. Um, and I feel like, you know, I don't know, this is my opinion, but I feel like everything has been, where we are right now benefit from that, right? Um, Young Justice included, right? I think like
Of
those
course.
types of stories, I remember flat out being told back then, it's kind of like, they don't want connecting stories because they don't want to have to, just because the way it's broadcasted, right? They don't want to have a Saturday morning or a weekday 3 o'clock, whatever that block is, where they have to play episodes in order, right? They want to be able to just play an episode and it's its own sort of like contained story.
How funny.
So
Wow. Never thought about that.
yeah, I mean that was a thing that they talked about, right? And so again,
Yeah.
like um, no deaths or whatever. This is like 90s, right? It's like heavily regulated, restricted, by broadcast standards and practices.
Right.
Um, so again, things like that we see now, I feel like you know um, have evolved into that, right? And so I've always appreciated. I've known Brandon for like a long time, right? Um, but I've always sort of, his the thing about Brandon is like he's such a hard worker. I think he will outwork almost anybody, right? Um, and just that sort of dedication to kind of like, what I mean, I don't know, I especially like the last season of Young Justice. Do you know what I mean? It was politically, the political climate was something, and he was sort of part of the tail end of that, but he, I think, stuck to his guns, right? And they sort of like, because I felt like he felt that stuff was important,
Yeah.
and so I don't know, I just really, and the dedication to it, like he had, they had, the production had, what do you call it? Like, what do you call it? It's like people that they hired people to bounce ideas off of just to make sure that they're sort of like dealing with things correctly, right?
Like consultants?
Consultants, yeah, yeah.
Oh wow.
Um, and so again, because it's like, you know, two white men basically telling stories of like, you know, and so
Oh, I gotcha. Okay.
yeah, and so I, I don't know, like again, like he felt like it was important, and I really admire him for doing that, right? And again, they're such craftsmen, which is infuriating to work with sometimes, because they're very exact in what they kind of want, right? And
Yeah.
it's uh, it's great in certain kind of ways, but it doesn't allow for, you know what I mean, like other people's ideas sometimes to kind of come in, stuff like that. So again, that's why it was, I don't know, it was rough for me, right? It was difficult for me to work with them, even though again, like Brandon, again, you know, um, I worked with for a long time, and I know him quite well, right? Um, he was actually my board artist, for a long while, whatever. And yeah, I we argued a lot. We sort of, you know, had different views on certain kind of things, but we worked things out, kind of stuff, right? And we were two guys. I remember at Sony that we would work on the weekends, whatever. And sometimes again, we would just have dinner at like 2 o'clock in the morning. We would just like go, like, okay, let's go get something to eat, kind of a thing, right? So there's a
Wow.
lot of like foxhole stuff with him, um, and yeah. Again, like I explained earlier, right? Just about the whole thing of different ways that they're technicians, and they sort of like to sort of plan every single thing out. And again, it doesn't leave a lot of sort of room for anybody else to do kind of stuff.
Sure.
But again, they have a very tight product and a very, very specific type of kind of thing, which, you know, which is great, especially for fandoms, right? Because again, it's all those things are tied pretty nicely into a bow, and they all kind of like come together. So
Yeah, they really challenge the audience to pay attention because every line, every action meant something down the road.
yeah,
And I would tell people that, like, you can't skip an episode. You can't
yeah,
not pay attention to a scene because it's gonna come back. And sure enough, they were, telling stories from season 1 all the way to the 4th season. And
right,
I'm sad we're not gonna get any more, but I feel like the 4th season was already we were already on borrowed time. We were
mm,
already on borrowed time with season 3,
yeah,
because we never thought that was gonna happen. So,
yeah,
season 3 was a blessing. Season 4 was just the cherry on top. So, I'll be satisfied with 4 glorious seasons, if that's really what it is, but it's been alongside Batman the Animated Series, which I can't deny,
yeah,
probably my 2 favorite animated projects of all time, just
yeah,
top
yeah,
notch, anything. So, did you ever see the posted white wall or whiteboard in person, and how, like, intimidating is it to see it
yeah,
top to
yeah,
bottom?
yeah. It's literally grids and a bunch of post-it notes, like all over the place.
So I don't know if Ray, if you know about this or not. So Brandon and Greg, they're literally like magicians, and so they would have every arc, every character, different colors, post-its meant different things, right?
Yeah,
So plots, scenes, characters, and they would have it all on this big wall, and it would be like, trying to solve a serial killer murder spree, like lines everywhere. We'd only I think maybe once we would see a photo of it, but blurred out or something like that, because it's all like highly classified information. But it's just, I imagine in person, if you're working on Young Justice, it's got to be sort of overwhelming to see like this is the rule, this is the Bible that you're having to live by. Do not stray away from our holy Bible that is Young Justice, the whiteboard of
yeah.
post-it.
It's it's not uncommon that writers, especially for like a series, have things like that, right? But it's just the amount of post-its, you know what I mean, on it, and just how how many boards it took up to do that. Uh,
because it was what, something around 100 characters, maybe.
That's the other thing too. It's just like there's so many dang characters in it. It was like a nightmare to storyboard, right?
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah.
And oh my gosh, I forget the guy's name that had to design all the characters, but I
Phil
asked
Dawson.
him. Tim, yeah.
Phil, right?
Phil.
Yeah.
I asked him once, I think it was San Diego, and I asked him something to the effect of, "You probably have the hardest job of all, because you're having to redesign or recreate hundreds of characters for, like, the next season." And yeah, he just expressed his, like, sort of, exhausted, sort of nature that he was going through, because he's literally just designing new characters over and over again, and that probably never happens, or just it doesn't happen on that level in any sort of other project, but he's, designing hundreds and hundreds of characters. Chris Jones is also a friend of ours. I've interviewed Chris a couple of times, and he started on the comic, but I think he also did storyboards with
Yeah.
the team eventually. So
Yeah.
he's an awesome guy. Ray, I have another, like, animated movie I was going to talk about, but Ray, do you have a favorite project that Sam's worked on?
Man,
Like, what's at the top of the list? And I know these are all iconic movies. I do have one animated film that's at the top of my list, but I want to hear yours.
well, it's kind of hard. I mean, there's so many to pick from. All Star Superman, I liked.
Well,
Um, and it's kind of funny that that's where James Gunn is taking somewhat of
Mm.
supposedly we're gonna get from Superman. Um, but that series, how hard was it to put that together?
yeah, it's always difficult um, to translate a series into one film, right?
Yes.
I've always said that it works better in a series because it's like a book in chapters, basically, right? You can reset; it doesn't have to tie together. But when it's in one movie, there's a thread that you're following for the whole thing, right? Um, but again, like a lot of times, especially like All Star Superman, right, which is like what's it supposed to be, the seven trials of it's like in two issues you're on Bizarro World and stuff like that. How do you flow that into something? You know what I mean? Because there are so Dwayne McDuffie, who's the person that sort of he had the task of trying to put a script to that series, right? From what I heard, Grant Morrison was actually really impressed and happy with how he did it, and
Yeah.
thought he had a lot of good ideas. Um, and it's still, I feel like it's kind of a bumpy ride, especially the first. When we were editing it, it kind of, I think it broke up into 5 reels, right? And so I remember feeling like the first 2 reels, it was kind of bumpy. But then I think by when we got into the third, fourth, and fifth, I feel like that it's pretty smooth in how sort of the narrative kind of works. Um, I think it was for a while. I feel like because I just kind of feel like when you're in the industry, right? You always hope that you have like one movie that's like your magnum opus, or the one that you're most proud of, kind of a thing, right? And I think for a while that was the one that, because again, I just love character kind of stuff, right? Like that story is like all about like character, right?
Yeah.
Um, it wasn't about like one big epic fight or something like that, right? I mean, sure, there's fights in it and stuff like that, but I don't think that's the heart of it. Um, and just ideas, his character, they're all tests to basically test his patience. I feel like um, there's only been like a small handful of moments where I feel like it was a mistake, but I was made to sort of like have to do it, right? And one of them again was, I think, when Superman smashes or deactivates the red sun or that sun robot thing. Um,
Yeah.
line for that because I felt like the whole movie was just about him taking stuff and being patient, right?
Yeah.
And basically taking punishment. But that line, I feel like just undercuts everything. You know, it's just that
Yeah.
I have none left. You know, and I'm just like, ugh. I fought hard to basically say like I don't think this line works. I think we need another line. But uh, anyways, but yeah, I mean, I for a while I think that was the one that I was proud of. But oddly enough, I showed it to my sister because she has kids and she's you know what I mean. Like she's a supporter of kind of what I do and stuff like that. But I don't think she got it, and I think she was kind of bored with it, honestly.
No,
But oddly enough, also it's funny because like some of these emotional kind of things, like you know, my close friends or people I rely on, like I feel like sometimes they don't get it. I'm just like it makes me wonder why am I friends with these people if they don't understand. Like, but like death again, like
yeah.
I showed it to my fiance or whatever, and she was like, yeah, and I'm just like, oh my god, you know. And then again, like two of my other like really close friends who are you know what I mean in the entertainment business too, and I remember showing it to them, and I was just thinking like they're gonna get it, and they're just like, oh yeah, it's good. I'm like, oh,
Oh.
so
No,
um,
and it's one of those things. It's depending how you grew up looking at Superman and that run that Morrison did when he wrote the graphic novel or
yeah,
the comic itself. It was hard waiting month to month to read the next episode, the next issue,
yeah,
and then but once you got it and it completed and you read it again from beginning to end, it really fell into place.
yeah,
And that's why I liked it. Um, and that's why I like this one. I mean, you've done so much, but this was the one that really liked the most. Just because yes, it was a lot to cram into that series of what was written. Um, but and like I said, I'm looking forward to see what James Gunn does because I'm wanting to see. I'm going to be looking forward to see what he took from that series and
yeah,
how he incorporated that Superman into the new Superman movie. And that's why I really am looking forward to this new Superman movie.
yeah. Some people have said that that's like the greatest Superman comic written, right? Like some
Yeah,
people again, that's the best Superman story like ever. So
yeah. And what is yours, Ted?
I'm gonna give you mine now. Still my favorite animated movie of all time. I can't think of anything that's ever gonna surpass it. And you were the storyboard artist for it, but it's still a project you worked on. And your buddy Brandon was actually the director.
yeah,
Uh, Batman Under the Red Hood.
yeah. A lot of
For
people,
whatever I
yeah,
remember just watching that, just thinking it was epic. It was intense. Um, it was so emotional. I mean, you could not help but just feel for the villain who was, um, Jason Todd at the time. And it just, man, it stuck with me forever. It still is to this day. I don't know why we haven't seen this play out well in live action form. They kind of tried to do it with Titans, but Titans isn't about Jason Todd, so like it was never gonna kind of reach its potential of what it should have been. But yeah, Under the Red Hood, all time favorite animated film. Nothing's ever gonna beat it, I don't think. And I wish we would get something in live action form that would attempt to engage with the audience on an emotional level like that. Maybe one day, but I'm surprised it hasn't happened
yeah,
yet. It's 2025 and we've not had a Red Hood film or anything close to it yet, which is wild to me.
yeah. I mean, especially because you know, originally I was going to say like you know, in a way that's also like another thing that's like you have to sort of kind of know these characters because again, there's got to be sort of an understanding and a connection of them first, right? Before, but you know, there's been so many Batman's movies, and I think everybody in the world knows who Batman is, and everybody knows who Robin is that, I think you're right. I think that, it's not like it's just some new character that nobody's ever heard of kind of a thing that, so I feel like all that stuff's already built in, but again, like I feel like these emotional, I feel like it's easier to do like, I mean, from a narrative point, right? Um, the, these stories with like deep sentiment and character, they're so delicate and really like difficult to put together sometimes, right? Because they have to sort of be put together in a correct way,
Sure.
and I don't feel like everybody's like equipped to do that necessarily, um,
Yeah. Okay.
and to kind of get, because again, like Brandon again is a technician, right? It's funny because again, like um, All Star Superman, Red Hood, and I guess Batman, Superman, Apocalypse, that Supergirl one.
Oh yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, yeah.
Those are
Yeah.
all sort of made within a month of each other. Right?
Yeah.
Oh,
Red Hood first, um, Apocalypse a month right after that, and there was this crazy overlap, right? And then
You're
also
right. Yeah.
last, right?
Yep.
So, um, Lauren Montgomery was the director on the Batman Superman Apocalypse, right? And I was director obviously on the All Star Superman. But we were so mad at Brandon because he was like so demanding on the team that we were like losing people, right? Because they were so burnt, and he was
oh wow.
so, it was but he cared so much, right? But I remember like again when it came out, I remember Lauren and I were watching and we're just like, man, like we should have like just did the same thing because like look how great this turned out and look at sort of like the level of care was in it.
Oh yeah.
But because again, like the business of it and stuff like that, like I guess what I'm saying is like Brandon pushed against the rush a little bit, whereas like Lauren and I were like the good soldiers and tried to like hit these deadlines and sort of like turn stuff in with a depleted crew. So, um,
Wow.
um, so yeah. Anyways, but also I kind of feel like it's kind of like and I think this is always like a difficult kind of thing, right? Because especially in movies like that, right? There's a formula, right? Because it's a personal thing about like these characters and sort of like how they sort of like connect in mythology, in the DC mythology, right? And you're seeing it sort of play out, right? Um, and it's sort of a who done it, and there's a mystery element to it, kind of a thing, and then there's a personal stake, an emotional investment, and sort of like the I don't know, it's almost like the sort of like the betrayal felt by one character, to his father figure or something like that. Right? These really sort of like primal sort of themes in a way, right?
Yeah.
Um, and done, very meticulously. But you can't tell those. You can't keep telling those types of stories, right? Those just come up between the explosions and stories and the sort of like just heist movies and the whatever kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
So in a way, it's kind of like I don't know, like people could say, like, why don't we just make it like another Red Hood movie or more movies that are like the Red Hood or something like that? And it's like you can't because it's like any kind of thing. Like you could eat the best steak, but if you have to eat that every day, you're just gonna get tired of
Tired.
it, right?
Yeah.
You just you just want like a variety. You want to change it up. It's only great because I don't know, like it's kind of like your palate has been cleansed, So I don't know, I think I feel like I look at things a little bit differently nowadays. Do you know what I mean? Because again, it's I feel like there's something else that's going on of why is like you know what I mean? Because it's kind of like Batman the animated series for me, right? Is you can't recreate that because it was a product of its time, and
Yeah.
everything around it at the time was not that. right? And when it came out, you're just like, this is different. This feels serious, even though like part of it is still kind of goofy and stuff like that, right? Um, but and it's telling these like deeper types of stories, right? Um, which are not just everybody's robbing a bank or something like that,
Yeah.
and there's something deeper to it, and it makes you think and it makes you feel about things, you know what I mean? And I don't know, that's why it was so great because within its restrictions, it was still able to do this, and it felt to me, and this is why I got into animation, right? The thing that, because again, I watched cartoons, again, certain ones, mainly the Japanese ones when I was a kid, but I was not really a comedy fan, you know what I mean? And so I, I wanted to do like serious things. I wanted to do like, again, the Japanese stuff, like the dark, people dying, people sacrificing, you know what I mean? For,
Wow.
like what in comic books, right? It's kind of like the story, the journey of the hero type of thing, right?
I hear
Um,
you.
so I don't know. Batman the animated series was just kind of like, wow, this stuff is happening, on TV and American animation. I was just like, maybe I could do something like this, maybe, you know, I would want to do something like this. So
You have such a great analytical mind for good storytelling. I'm sitting here, Ray's probably thinking the same thing. Why haven't you written anything?
there's a difference between writing it and then sort of like putting something together, right?
Okay.
It's kind of like I feel like I can doctor certain things where I feel like there's certain parts where I feel like I'm not again I like I was saying, it's just like I everything is sort of based off of like, am I feeling something at this point, right? I'm
Mm,
just kind of like there's certain moments when I read it and I'm just like I don't feel it, right? Or I'm like, okay, I know what that was supposed to be. I think I can recreate it so you feel something, right? Again, like the weasel thing. Again, like the I don't know, like again, I don't want to like minimize it, right? But I feel like a lot of things that like in James Gunn's, like even just reading through Creature Commander, right? The seven stories, right? I was like, even again, like Guardians of the Galaxy, that everybody's sort of like, oh, you got to watch this thing; it's going to make you cry, you know. Guardians of the Galaxy 3. I'm just like, these are things I've seen before, right? These
mm,
aren't new things, right? But
right.
again, it's like the death story for me, right? I'm just like, even when I was like, like had the idea and I was explaining to like Jim DeMattis, right? Which it was such a pleasure to work with him. Um, I was just like, these aren't like new concepts, right? It's just like jaded people or people that are whatever that like that are older or whatever. They'll probably be like, wow, that's like so naive. Like it's so juvenile in a way, right? But I feel like you got to sort of tap into sort of like there's a first time for everybody kind of thing, right? And it's like just because you're old and you're jaded and whatever like that, sure, it's not like don't acknowledge that or whatever, but I think that you need to appreciate it and invest in it kind of a thing, right? Especially as a filmmaker, you just got to commit to it, right? Like the weasel thing again, to me, I'm just like, this is a story in a situation loosely or broadly, right? That's sort of been done many times before, right? But I'm just like, you just got to lean in and you just got to like go hard on it, right? You
Yeah.
just got to hit the things. Oh, here's another stupid kind of like analogy, right? I remember like watching the the new Star Trek movies, the
Yeah.
Chris Pine ones, like the sort of reverse, Spock death, Kirk death, the Wrath of Khan remake, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
People were talking about it before I saw the movie, right? And I was just kind of like, oh boy, here we go, okay, let's see how they do this heart wrenching moment kind of thing, right? I teared up, and I knew it was coming because I was just like, this felt honest to me,
Yep.
and what they're saying, it still touches me. You know what I mean? About like honor and sort of sacrifice and all those kind of things. And I'm just like, I mean, everybody wants to be so quick to sort of like, oh, I spotted that or I am blah, 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 whatever like that, right? But it's about how it's executed, really. You know what I
Exactly.
mean? Because again, it's like what they talk about, right? There's only 7 stories ever told. They're just told in different ways or something like that, right? Or
Yeah.
the scope's different or whatever, right? But at its core, it's basically these whatever, I'm sure it's outdated, but there's stories are there's basic archetype, right? Especially the journey of the hero,
Yep.
right? There's even less. There's maybe four. I couldn't break it down what they were, but again, like there's only so many ways you can like overcome sort of kind of thing and rise up and become the hero kind of thing, right? Like and beat somebody up or so, whatever it is, right? You just do it in different ways. Like sometimes you're not physically beating up, you're beating up, in an intellectual, whatever, right? Um, but I think again, it's how you tell the story and sort of like again, just you just gotta like know how to push buttons, I guess, or what seems honest to people.
I feel that. Absolutely.
Yeah. But anyways, but writing I think is hard because again, it's kind of like I I wouldn't know how to like write dialogue. Do you know what I mean? Again, I even when I like do notes, they're in the ham-fisted way, and I try to explain. I was just like, this is the intent of it, and don't do it like the way I wrote it. But this is what it's supposed to kind of feel like, especially with like again like I don't know. I hate to bring up. I don't know. I'm just gonna do it because again, I was such a fan of Neil Gaiman, right? Because again, it's kind of like um, the way like I feel like articulate people know how to like write dialogue, which is not like just on the nose and like hitting you over the head. I like her. He likes her. She feels creeped out, and then
Yeah.
what I mean. Like, how do you sort of again like James Gunn? I think does this really well too. It's kind of like you're saying something, but you're not saying the direct thing, right? You put these people in a situation, and you get the same answer, like they're bound for life kind of a thing. And instead of saying like, oh, I've went through the however many wars with you, and like, oh, you did the blah blah blah, whatever like that. It's not. He doesn't say that, right? It's like you show stuff, and not even in the most direct kind of way. Like they probably hated each other, but yet he saved them, and all you remember is like he knocked him out or whatever. You know what I mean? And drew a mustache on his face or something like that. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? But it's I don't know. Again, that's writing to me. Do you know what I mean? Like
I gotcha.
I'm not that clever, and I'm not that good at it. I know. Again, it's the crux. The heart of it is supposed to be because they see he saved him, and that's a thing that sort of like is important to him, kind of thing, right? But how do you set all those kind of things up? First of all, there's a value to it, and what happens, and he does the thing of value to this one specific person because they, you know, it could be I don't know something silly like I don't know he likes acorns or something like that, and he picked the acorn for him, and that would mean so much to him.
Yeah.
But you got to establish a language, and you got to establish the connective, the thing that sort of connects you emotionally, kind of thing, right? And again, like the ones that sort of is not just like what's the word? There's a semiotics, right? Which is like a visual language kind of thing, right? It's what do they call it? It's like signals or signage or something like that, right? It's kind of like you look at the Apple logo and you assume certain things because it's loaded with something, right?
Yep.
Simpler kind of things is like you again. This was the example that was told to me, and I keep using it even though it's like inappropriate. But it's like it's like you see like an image of a woman's mouth moaning or something like that. You understand that it's like sex or something like that, right? It's like that's sort of semiotics in a way, right?
Gotcha.
And so I don't know. Like again, some people use that really well, and not just the most sort of obvious kind of ways, right? And so um, I don't know. Again, I feel like clever writers, right? They know how to like navigate more eloquently and stuff like that. Whereas I feel like I'm a caveman. And I'm just whacking the bowl. So,
Well, I think one day you might surprise yourself, and me and Ray will be excited to kind of see maybe a Sam Liu written project and see how great it turns out. Sam, you've been a part of some of the most iconic animated projects we've seen. I even talked about growing up watching Extreme Ghostbusters. I haven't watched the Godzilla series. I thought that was cool as hell. I like the movie. I understand it's not what everybody's cup of tea was, especially design of Godzilla. But for the
yeah,
time, it kind of worked. So, we just want to thank you, man, for all your work, all your time and effort spent. We know your job isn't easy by any stretch of the imagination. We know it takes a team of people to make these things work and to make them as good as you guys make them. So we just want to thank you for all you've done for us. Continue putting out just epic bangers and projects left and right, because we're gonna love everything else that comes out from you and from your team. And just thanks again, man, and appreciate you taking time to speak with us today.
No, thank you for inviting me and being as gracious and thoughtful, actually, of your approach and sort of like your questions and things like that. Um, I don't know, like as much as I've complained about certain things or whatever like that. And maybe this kind of like ties into fandom also, because I think a lot of times when I do interviews, I'm just expecting to answer these like you know difficult questions. You know what I mean? It's not about and it's always like servicing. I feel like somebody's, I don't know, ism or view on something, and it's not sort of necessarily like a, I don't know, like
Your
a
experiences.
generally interest of on the art or anything like that, or sort of
Yeah.
like the craft. It's a lot of times it's just like a platform for people to sort of like vent about like what they, I don't know, disliked or whatever. You know what I mean?
Oh
Which
yeah.
is fine, and I get it. But I feel like I've gotten a lot more guarded and a lot more cranky about it. So it's kind of nice to just, you know what I mean, just have a sort of, because I don't mind questions. Again, if it's like it's a genuine question. Do you know what I mean? It's not some sort of like, I don't know, something disguised as sort of like you know what I mean, like a rant that they kind of like.
Right.
On. Um,
It's not just somebody fishing for a sound bite.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So I don't know. I appreciate that, and also as difficult as it is, kind of like what I had said. I think about like me dipping my toes into video games for a couple of years. Um, I think like storytelling and sort of what I'm doing is something that's really fulfilling for me and really enjoyable to me. And it's difficult because again, it takes so many people, and it's like you know, it's just great when you are on a production where everybody's sort of like lined up. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just really difficult when you're not seeing things the same way or whatever, yet you still have to sort of like make something kind of a thing. You know what I mean?
It's
Um,
tough. It's got to be challenging.
and everybody has to do that to some extent. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for
Some
sure.
more than others. But it's almost like you just wish, especially like when you're doing like art for a living kind of a thing. Like it's more of a choice. Like I feel like there's easier ways to make money.
Yeah.
That requires less investment. You know what I mean? Um, and I feel like a lot of what they're gaining or banking on is your investment, and that's why you work so hard to kind of do it. um, but I don't know, like I'm sure like everybody, we're people and stuff like that, right? It's like one of the saddest things to me was like I don't know, maybe it's like too much, but I just remember like when we were doing the Comic-Con panel for Killing Joke, right? I remember because it was like a rated R, we had to sort of move things around because normally we'll, because rated R you have to play it after I think 9 o'clock, right? But normally what we do is like you know I think we play the movie, have a panel, and then afterwards we go out to that dinner that I was talking about, right? Like with everybody, right? But because it was rated R, or whatever, I think we had dinner first, and then we had a panel before the movie, and then we showed the movie, right? But I remember like so earlier in the day, like there's the sound check thing that I didn't go to, but Tim went to, right? And so we were at dinner, and I remember I think he was pretty happy with what we'd done. He was just like, it's like I really like this, It's like I think that, you know, it's just like I like the sort of front part of it more than I like the Killing Joke part of it. You know what I mean? And so he was like, again, he kind of holds things close to the vest kind of a thing, right? So I was just like, oh man, it's so awesome that, you know what I mean? Like you actually like what we built, kind of a thing, right? And then we just get like trash, you know what I mean, at the the thing, right? And there's just certain things that I feel like, I don't know, and I feel like I realize it too. It's just like there's certain things that are like sacred, and you can't change it around too much. Do you know what I mean? Like Batman holding a gun, or even Superman killing somebody, or something like that. Do you know what I mean? Um, that just it's too far for fans to go to, right? I feel like in those types of things, you got to be extra careful in how you sort of like lead them down a path so they can get there. You can't just go there and then,
Yeah.
because it's too big of a shock to people's system. It's kind of a thing, you know.
You're not wrong about that. I'm less I see less sacredness in some of these things.
Mhm,
If it benefits the story,
mhm.
I'm totally on board.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
why Ben Affleck is my favorite live action Batman, because he really is the only one that had an arc. All
yeah,
the other ones, they were just brooding on the screen
yeah,
for an hour and a half, where Ben actually had to feel something.
yeah,
He actually had to be wrong. He actually had emotions.
yeah,
So yeah, and people had problems with it, but I'm just like, you want the same thing over and over again? Just, guy in a mask beating up folks? No,
yeah,
let's challenge
yeah.
ourselves to see something different for once.
Because I wish there were more people like you. Okay, and I'm the same way too. Like even with the Superman stuff, right? I'm like, all right, this is different. I was just like, but prove it to me,
Yeah,
right? I'm just like, I'm open. Just win me over, right? Or explain it to me, kind of a thing. I am, and I don't know. Even that, I kind of feel like if a lot more people were sort of just open to changes, right? Or because there's so many fans, right? Whether it's, I don't know, not just animation or movies and stuff like that, right? But um, I don't know. It's kind of like they just want to like what they like, and again, like I feel like a lot of people too, they're always chasing their first introduction to it because that is the most potent, right? That's the thing that made you into a fan, whether it's music or I always
yeah,
use the U2 as as a example, right? It's like you might have been like like War, like that the War album, if that was the one. Everything's going to be compared to War, and
right,
everything that's like not like War
right.
is not going to be like acceptable to you.
Yeah, fandoms are a weird thing. Social media hasn't helped.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Um, Ray and I, we've been talking about James Gunn and the challenge that he faces.
yeah,
It's no small feat
yeah,
by any means to try and unite a fandom that's been quite divided for some time. Just speaking about the DC side of things.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
um, good luck to him, and we'll see what happens from there. Sam, thanks again, man. We really appreciate this. And seriously, when you want to go to a game, you're in, when you're in Texas, you let us know, man. We'll make sure you got some good seats,
Oh
and
yeah, yeah.
you'll have a
I'll
great time.
definitely hit you guys up.
Absolutely,
Yeah, for sure.
awesome.
Because I don't know anybody in San Antonio, so I'll need a tour guide or at least some pointers.
We got you. We got you. Thanks again, Sam. Good luck to you, man, on everything else you got going on, and we can't wait to see what's next.
It's been a pleasure, guys.